Welcome to the Connectfulness Practice Podcast. Here, we settle into the murky, tangled, and freaking hard parts of life to restore our relationship with the self so it can ripple out to the people we love, the work we do, and the world around us. If we can't fix what's wrong, then our grandchildren inherit it. In order to fix what's wrong, we have to talk about it. And we can't move that conversation forward if we're not willing to be real about where we are now. We have to push on the edges of what it means to connect. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. I'm your host, Rebecca Wong, and I'm here to guide you through a series of radically honest conversations about what it means to be truly human in all of its messy, beautiful, hilarious, and heartbreaking glory. In our collective effort of looking inward, we're starting to do the outward work to reconnect the world. While these discussions will guide you into the connectfulness practice, this podcast is not meant to be a substitute for the depth of work that you'd encounter with a licensed provider. If something in this episode touches you, reach out. That's where you initiate the ripple that restores relationships. You can learn more about my connectfulness counseling practice and our collective for therapists in private practice at connectfulness.com. Welcome back to the podcast. You know, so often in the journey of relational healing, we discover that parts of us have been shut down. Parts of our spirit that invite for spontaneity and allow for our imperfections and cultivate space for abundance and joy are often parts that we disown, we disconnect from, we dissociate from. And so much of the work, I believe, of connectfulness is about learning how to integrate all of these parts of ourselves back into one wholeness, into one whole integrated state. And this is a place of connectfulness, which is a practice of exploring the roots of disconnection and consciously restoring wholeness in yourself and in relationships. What we're about to talk about today is the creative process and how the creative process can help to reform those connections, can help you make space that allows you to bear witness to yourself. My guest today, Zydel, also known as the Wild Heart Queen, works with people using both creativity and artistic expression as a way of getting in touch with the deeper aspects of who they are. Chris is the head creative goddess at Creative Juices Arts. She has over 40 years experience as a compassionate creativity guide and an unshakable faith in the power of unbridled self-expression to heal hearts and change lives. Chris says that the creative juice is our ability to meet the mystery of what we don't know within ourselves and within each other. I hope that today's conversation offers you some inspiration so that you can work towards reclaiming your own connections, so that you can start with trusting in your own deeper knowings. Listen to your intuitive self and let it lead you wherever it does. And as you will hear in today's conversation, so much of the work that Chris and I offer happens in collective spaces where we're not alone and we have opportunities to reflect and explore and reshape how we see ourselves and develop new cultures. And so I want to remind you that I have some offerings coming up in early 2021. Starting in February, there's a 6-week online course called Supporting Your Relational Self. This will be the 4th cohort that I have facilitated, and I am really excited to bring more people into this work. And then in April 24th and 25th of 2021, Jules Shore, Victoria Issa, and I are again leading another 2-day Essential Skills Relationship Bootcamp. This is the RLT bootcamp that was developed by Terry Real, and we're really excited to lead this again. So if you'd like to learn more about either of my offerings, you can do so by going to connectfulness.com/offerings. And without further ado, here's the show. Oh, dear friends and listeners, I'm here today with Chris Zydel, the Wild Heart Queen. Chris, welcome.
Oh, Rebecca, hello, darling. It's so great to be here with you. It's just so great. So excited.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to just orient folks to the context in which we met each other.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you and I were chatting about this just before we started recording, and this goes back, 2 years ago, I think, or
Yeah, it was
thereabouts?
2 years ago, October.
Yeah, October of 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been 2018. And
Mm-hmm.
we were studying with Dr. Clarissa Pincola Estes. You
Mm-hmm.
are a longtime student of hers, and it was one
Mm-hmm.
of my first experiences being in that residential training program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was actually my first time there too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh no, it was my very first time being in the residential training. Yes.
Oh, and so
Yeah.
we just kind of sat with each other a lot and shared energy and took in
Yeah.
the wisdom together.
Yes, we did. We
Yeah.
did. We did. We really went into a very sweet, creative space with each other. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you here and to share your wisdom with our
Mm.
listeners here today.
Mm.
And, you know, unlike maybe some other episodes that I have done on this show, I'm intentionally coming into this conversation pretty agenda free and open to
Great.
whatever comes forth.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that. Well, and the thing about that is that that's the work that I do.
I know.
Yeah.
Which is
So
why
it's
I feel
actually
totally like that's where I need to start.
oh my God, it's like perfect. It's just
Yeah.
so perfect. Oh my God, that's great, Rebecca. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So let's
Yeah.
tell folks about the work that you do and the way that you just
Mm-hmm.
approach
Mm-hmm.
um, being, like
Mm-hmm.
creative being, the mystery of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I use creativity. I use the intuitive painting process. I use the expressive arts as a way to. I work with people. I work with people individually. I have classes, workshops, retreats, training programs. I do this whole thing, and I use creativity, and I use artistic expression as a way to get in touch with the deeper aspects of who we are. So what I do, I don't teach people how to make art. I'm not interested in pretty art. I'm not interested in technique, none of that. It's really using art in this way to go inside, to go inside and to explore those inner landscapes of who we really are and to allow that to be expressed.
And so one of the things I take away when I witness your offerings or when I read some of your writings, one of the big things I often take away is that there's no right way to do this.
Exactly. There is no right way to do that. Yeah, there's only your way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so maybe something that strikes me is, even when I'm just doing deep exploratory work in psychotherapy sessions, experiential work with folks, I often have people kind of sometimes, like when they're just learning how to do this work, they kind of drop in and then they pop out and they go, am I doing it right?
Yes.
Right? That kind of, am I doing it right? Right? That
Yes.
feels like it's such a big human question.
Yeah, it's a big human question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it comes up in all kinds of ways. Like you said, it comes up, in psychotherapy, it comes up in life. It definitely comes up in art.
Yes.
Because we all have so much training and conditioning around that there is a right way to do art. So, and that's one of the things that I'm really working to disabuse people of that idea, that there's a right way. Yeah.
So that's like a portal into some of my fascination in your work.
Great.
Is that exact space, because I feel like this is the lie that so many of us have been fed, that there is a way, right?
Yes,
and it leads to kind of how we assimilate ourselves, and we all try to be like and do it right. And we lose the power of who we are.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And it's that whole thing about, we get trained to be a certain way. We think we have to fit in. We're always looking for approval, and it's a safety thing, it's a trauma related thing. It's that way that, most of us don't have that container. We don't have that, that way of being held, or we didn't have that way of being held either in our families or the culture or schools or any of that, where we were supported to trust in ourselves and to trust in who we are. So we're looking for that safety outside of ourselves, you know, and it's like, is this the right way? Is this the right way? So that we can feel, that we can feel safe, you know, so that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you use art often as a tool to help people go through that process. There's many,
That's
as
right.
we said, there's many ways to go through that.
Yes. Many ways. Yes.
Using art as a creative part of that process as a tool. Where do most people begin, and how do you help them get to that place of like, oh, it's about me?
Yes, that's a really good question. And that is the challenge, you know, I mean, that really is the challenge. Well, you know, most people start with fear. There's a lot of fear around, you know, am I going to do it right? And then they kind of jump in with their eyes closed, and, you know, oftentimes they'll just start off just making a mess, you know, and thinking that that's their real expression. And it can take a while for them to settle into really feeling that their authentic expression is going to be accepted, that their authentic expression is going to be seen and it's going to be held. So it's a trust building thing, you know. It's very much like psychotherapy, you know. I mean, I have a background as a psychotherapist, so and you know what that's like. Once you're a psychotherapist, you're always a psychotherapist.
It's a hat you wear.
It's a hat you wear. It's a part of your being. So there's that thing about really teaching people, you know, that it's okay to express themselves authentically, and that is going to be, like I said, it's going to be held, it's going to be witnessed, it's going to be received with love, with enthusiasm, and it can take a while to get there, because the thing that
that's the trauma that most of us have.
Exactly, that's the trauma.
Is not being able to just be.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's right. Yeah. So there's a lot of the inner critic stuff. I mean, that's a lot of what I work with. You know, that's kind of it was interesting. I was talking with, you know, one of my students recently, and I was having her do a thing where I was having her do a writing project, because I use all different kinds of creative modalities. I mean, painting is definitely one of them, but and to have her start getting in touch with her inner wise woman, you know, through writing, and having the inner wise woman, you know, write through her or write a letter to her. And so she was able to really access, and we had been doing a lot of work before that, you know. And so I said, you know, you really have a very, you know, powerful access. And she said, well, everybody has an inner wise person. I said, that's true, but a lot of other people have so many layers that you have to work through to get there. You know, and she had already worked through that. So that's what the work that I do with people is really about, you know, identifying those layers. You know, what is it that's really you, and what is it that is this conditioning, or what is it that's the trauma? So that can be a challenging thing to get people to really recognize, you know, because people get so identified with a critic that they think it's them, you know, and they don't know how to connect with what's true and what's real. And so that's part of the work that I do, is helping them to tell the difference between those two things. Yeah.
So I wish I had met you like 30 years ago. You know, there was a time in my life where I was an art school student.
Oh, you were? Oh,
I was.
I didn't know that, honey.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's huge.
It was.
You're an art school
the critique. Yes, the refugee piece. I was, you know, so accustomed to the critique, and okay, well, this you did okay, and this you should have really done this differently, and you know, so I just ran away from art school and ran towards therapy.
Of course you did. Oh, honey, of course you did. That's just
Well, it is just the way I think that so many of us have grown in this world. Especially, well, I can't really speak for other countries, but here in America, we're so focused on assimilation.
Yes.
We're so focused on everybody being a certain way that will be accepted. And that voice of, you know, like the overculture, that voice gets so ingrained in who we are.
Yes. And it becomes, and this is the thing, this is the, one of the challenging places that I have to work, the edge that I work with people is helping them to really disidentify from that voice, because they will be painting and then something will come out and they'll have some opinion about it, that it's ugly or it's stupid or it's meaningless or some kind of a thing. And I'll say to them, okay, let's come into your body, and let's feel what it really felt like to paint that. Generally, there's a tremendous amount of energy. Oftentimes there's joy, but there's still this identification with that voice. That's the overculture voice saying, oh, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with how you expressed yourself. And so to get people to really get that that's not them, is huge. It's really a huge piece of the work,
Yeah. I often talk with my couples, with my individuals who are coming to see me about how so much of the work we do is geared at helping us find our way into that wise self.
Yes. Right.
Like that is where the healing lies.
Mm-hmm. That's
right. Is
That's
getting back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so it was born into us from the beginning. And we spend the rest of our lives trying to find our way back to.
Yes, exactly. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's the same thing, you and I use the same language. I talk about the inner wise person and the inner healer, and that we all have, that's always there. Yeah. And it's just opening to that. And one of the things that I love about the creative process, especially the painting process, is it's a way to access that because it bypasses language. When you're painting, you're painting with color, you're painting with shape, you're painting with image. That's it. There's no words. Yeah. And so that helps people to connect much more kind of
straight to the emotion.
Straight to the emotion. That's right. Straight to the emotion, straight to the energy, straight to the pure aliveness. And because that's another part of the work that I'm doing is like, how alive do you feel in this moment? Yeah. And that, really teaching people that aliveness is embracing all of it.
I'm hearing this, and in my head flashed some images and videos and pictures that I had taken of my own children when they were younger, where they were painting their bodies and just putting the naked painting all over themselves and then painting our faces. And what strikes me about those moments is the joy that's like the vitality that lives in those moments. And how much as we grow up, we dull that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And that's really the work that I'm doing, that you're doing. That we're all doing, is helping people to take the lid off, helping people. Yeah. And it's that thing, like, this is something, well, there's a story that I like to tell about a woman who, she'd come to paint with me. She came to one of my retreats at Ghost Ranch that I used to do a million years ago. And she was a very straightforward person. And she said to me, before we got started working together, she said, I just want you to know that I've done a lot of work with a lot of different healers. And I always get to this point where I'm too much. And people are always like, okay, they shut me down. And I was like, okay, great. Thank you for that information. I appreciate that. So then she started painting, and she had painted some big penis. She painted this huge penis on her painting, this huge sexual energy. And she looked at me and I said, is that all you got? So, and of course she continued to paint with me for like 12 years. It's just.
She felt safe.
Safe, and she felt invited. There was something that you had said something before we started, I think, something about permission, and it's that whole permission piece to be as big as you are, to be as alive as you are, to go to whatever edges that you have, and to not, like you said, not be dulled down or dumbed down, Yeah. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun, to be in that energy and to have people be in their own energy of their full aliveness and find their edges and keep going beyond them and beyond them. And it's the best thing ever.
It strikes me too, how necessary it is in this time in 2020 that we're living in.
Yes.
that that people can have permission or find that permission within themselves to be themselves.
Yes. Yes.
And to it's funny, I'm noticing as I'm saying this out loud, there's a dance happening internally inside of me, and I just want to name it.
Okay.
There's the one part where we should all be allowed to fully express and be ourselves, and there's the end, also take care of each other.
Yes.
Absolutely. So I'm just noticing those two pieces. Absolutely. That I'm just, you know, right. That collective energy kind of still is a part of this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things, the work that I do is always in circle. The work that I do is always in community. And the community piece is so important because it's really where people can, I mean, you know, people can get supported and held by you or I individually. And that's really beautiful. And I do that too. But there's something so powerful about coming into a circle, into a community space where everybody is encouraged to be themselves fully. Yeah. And then in that, they're supporting each other, they're caring for each other, they're witnessing each other, they're being inspired by each other, you know. So there's this huge community piece, you know, that is essential. Yeah. And there's something really important about being able to experience being as big as you are, or being as full as you are, or being as alive as you are, and having that not be scary, having that not be judged, having that not be rejected by your community. And so the community work is just, it's essential to this.
I'm imagining that in your experience, it has a similar effect that it has in my experience. And lately, some of the biggest community work that I'm doing is I'm leading these relationship boot camps where we teach people how to be like in respectful relationships, both with themselves and others.
Yes.
And what happens is on the second day of that, we start with a letter that they've all written to themselves, to the adaptive version of themselves, the part that has done all the work to keep themselves healthy, but isn't necessarily the wisest part and has also gotten in the way.
Yes.
And as they start to share those letters collectively in the group, people who didn't think that they were going to share the letters suddenly want to share their letters. And exactly. That is the, you know, the vulnerability of sharing and showing ourselves invites others to do the same.
Exactly. Right. Because, you know, one of the things that I like to say is the circle can hold it all. You know, that's something that, you know, and the other thing is that every time, and that everybody's work is everybody's work. And that, you know, every time somebody takes a courageous, creative risk, then it opens the door for everybody else to take that same risk, you know, to be vulnerable in that same way. And so the community piece is, you know, I mean, I do some individual work with people. I have a small private practice and I love that work, but you know, where my heart really lies is in
the collective
community, the collective. It's the collective, you know, and this is really what we need, you know. And the other thing that I feel like is happening when we do that community work and that collective work is we're creating a new culture.
We are. And that's so important.
That's so important. That's so important. We're creating a new culture, which is it doesn't play by the same rules, you know, as the culture the overculture, as Dr. E puts it.
I'm loving this, and I'm loving it for so many different reasons. And I'm only going to break the surface here. But one of the pieces of creating this new culture is that it's a culture that invites this raw being, this vulnerability, this intimacy, and also imperfection is welcome here.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that feels like it's such a big piece. I know we talked about how the word perfection kind of was inside of me as we were coming to this call. I find that this is what holds so many of us back, is that we're striving so hard to try to be perfect, to try to be seen as, to not let ourselves down. And because of it, we judge others and we have so far to fall.
Exactly. That's right. Well, and it's that whole idea that there is such a thing as perfection or imperfection.
Yes.
I mean, that's really a concept, that's a patriarchal concept, that there is such a thing that you can achieve or that you can attain, a perfection. And perfection is by its very nature not real. You can't be connected to the your authentic self and your life force and be perfect at the same time, or try to be perfect. And the perfect thing is people are always trying, because you can never get there because it's not real. It's not a real thing, but people do put effort and energy into that. And it's the perfection thing is the mask, it's the presentation. It's like, oh, I want people to see me in a certain way because I'm afraid if they see me for who I really am, and they see all the roiling inside of me and all the confusion inside of me and all the grief inside of me or the rage inside of me or all of the things or the power or the beauty or the joy, that I'm going to be rejected, that I won't be able to be part of the collective.
And so that right there seems to highlight, it's that fear of rejection.
Yes.
That is the drive.
Yes.
More so than anything else.
Yes, exactly. That's right. I think that's really what it is. And so people, when they come into the work, they come into the circle and they're tentative and they're scared and they're putting their little feelers out, like, okay, how is this going to be met? Will I be rejected for this? It's kind of like that story that I told about the woman with the huge penis painting, and her experience had been rejection.
Yeah.
In the past, people would say, okay, wait a minute. You just crossed a line. You're too big. You're too much. I'm closing the door. And so for her to feel like she was not only not rejected, but celebrated is like, kind of a mind fuck in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the work, is that we need those parts of us that feel so wild, that feel imperfect, that we don't know ourselves.
Yes.
That we're trying to come into contact with.
Yes.
The mystery.
The mystery. Yes.
We need an avenue in, and we need to feel held as we explore it.
That's right. Held. And there's a certain guidance around it too, because there is that thing, and you had mentioned this earlier when we were talking, the thing about, is this okay? Am I doing this right? And there's some of that. It's like the training wheels thing, it's that thing where somebody will paint something and they'll be like, oh my God, I painted this thing that's really intense or weird or vulnerable, or I don't understand it. And they'll kind of look to me or to look to whoever's facilitating, and it's like, is this okay? And so it's like, yes, yes, this is great, keep going.
Yeah.
So that's a necessary part. It's like really holding that younger part of us that really needs that kind of guidance, that kind of permission, the thing that we didn't get, when we were kids, so yeah.
Are you finding that there's some common threads in regards to what those younger parts need, what they didn't receive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that they need is just to be seen, to be reflected. Because there's a way that people will be like, they'll kind of throw something out there and then run away from it, and so part of my job, and I know part of your job too, is to be like, oh, wait a minute, I saw that, I saw that thing, and it's okay, and let's talk about that thing, and let's kind of go towards that thing, so it's kind of like the little animal in the woods thing, like you put your hand out and you're like, okay, it's okay, you can try, so there's that seeing, there's playfulness, there's gentleness, and there's compassion. I mean, I think that's, a big part of it. There's celebration, those parts of us really need to be celebrated and really need to feel like they're being loved. I mean, really, when it comes right down to it.
Who doesn't need all that? to
Well,
be seen, to
exactly.
play, to feel that there's gentle compassion around us, to be celebrated and loved.
Yes,
Who doesn't need all of that? All of us need
exactly.
that.
Everybody, yes, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this is baseline. And I mean, again, when I do this work and when I talk about this, I can feel some of the tears, coming up.
Yeah.
And now when you said that, it's that thing about like, we all need this. And it's so simple and it's so basic. And, if we could give this to everybody, this world would be,
A
uh,
different world.
it'd be totally a different world. It would be such a different world.
And
Yeah.
so if we can meet the mystery of what we don't know within
Yes.
ourselves and within each other with this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
Like,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
to borrow from some of your language, Chris, that to me feels like the creative juice.
Yes, it is the creative juice. Absolutely. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. Yes. Yeah, because that is right. The thing that we're really inviting
Yeah.
is really inviting that aliveness. I mean, one of the things I talk about with people is so, one of the things that happens is people get very much in their heads around their painting, and so they'll paint something and then they'll start to have all their opinions about it, like, well, it's good or it's bad or it's perfect or it's imperfect or I like it or I don't like it, or they'll have a story about it, like it's very mental. And so then I always say, okay, but if you come down into your body and you feel, was there energy for this? Was there emotion for this? How did you feel? Not what do you think about it? And then that opens the door into the juiciness, into that creative, juicy aliveness, because that's going on all the time. It's just that we are trained to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
We're trained to ignore it and we're trained to not value it.
Right.
We're trained to value and pay attention to what we think about things, not what's happening in our body and our emotions.
And we can so quickly, I know I'm speaking mostly just from my own experience as being a human, but we can
Yes.
so quickly be betrayed by our thoughts, whereas our feelings and our bodies can
Mm-hmm.
really hold us and ground us in many
Totally.
ways.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, because the thoughts are, well, again, so many of the thoughts, and kind of going back to the overculture idea or
Mm-hmm.
the assimilation idea, that you've been touching on, or the ways that we've been conditioned or the ways that we've been trained to fit in, really come, like there's this this running tape that's always assessing that. Does this work? Does this not work? Am I going to get in trouble for this? Do I fit in here? Are people going to like me? And that takes us away from our authentic connection to source, to our own bodies, to our own wisdom. And so that's really what this work is about, is really learning how to be grounded in that and trust that, that you can trust that no matter what the overculture has to say. And that's big, big work.
Huge work. And it strikes me why it's also so important, why the group element of it, the collective element,
Yeah.
is the container that holds that work, because if we're doing that on our own and with ourselves, it's easy to fall back into the self-judgment. If
Yes.
we're doing that work with a group of
Mm-hmm.
others who are also pushing themselves to that edge of going a little deeper into what they don't know, but just following it,
yes,
then it's easier to stay there.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole idea, and I love this concept too. When you're working with a group, when you bring a group of people together to do this work, that there's a field that gets created, this energetic field, and the field has a life of its own. It has an energy of its own. And that field is, the energy of all the things we talked about, of permission, of invitation, of compassion, of love, of excitement, of adventure, of exploration, creativity. And so people, that's one of the things that's so powerful about doing this in a group, because that field gets created and people are impacted by that.
Yeah.
They're inspired by that. And so they go further than they would on their own, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even go further than they would even like individual, doing individual work. And again, individual work is really potent and powerful. And I think, it has a very important place, but there's something that happens in
That
this
field.
group work. Yeah, it's well, what I call the predictable miracle, that.
I want you to talk more about that. This predictable miracle talk. Oh, wow.
Yes. Well, there's this thing that happens that you can count on. I never know how it's going to unfold, because every person is different, every group is different, but it always happens. People always find their way, to their authentic source, and they find that place of joy, and they find that place of expression, and they find that place of expansion. Like, it's predictable. It's something, again, if you create the right conditions, you create the right container, it feels safe enough, and there's the invitation for courage and bravery, with that safety, the miracle happens, and that miracle of unfolding happens every fucking time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was, for some, maybe it was because of this conversation, but I was in another conversation with someone else, and I ended up looking up the etymology of the word courage today.
Yes.
And core is heart.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
So that's so much what this calling is back to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my own curiosity. And I'm going to
Yes.
take a little tangent here, but where'd you
Go
get the
for it.
name, the Wild Heart Queen? Where'd that come from? Let us in. I love it.
Well, one of the, so my business is called Creative Juices Arts, but then I call my painting classes Painting from the Wild Heart. So that's, so that came first. And one of the things that I do, one of the offerings that I have is I do this workshop that's called the art of inner goddess creation. And it's really about working with archetypes, so I know goddess has like different kinds of, people have reactions to that, but it's really working with archetypal energy. And so I take people on a journey, on a creative journey, to help them identify what their archetype is, and then from that place, do all kinds of things to create from that place, and write about it, sing about it, dance about it. We do this whole crown thing with it. It's just an awesome thing. But I did that with myself first. I did this whole exploration into what was my archetypal energy that I was really here to bring to the world. That was my mission, my mission. And it was really that. It was, to be the that queen is really that empowered divine feminine, the heart is really about that expansive love, and then the wildness is just that permission to be and do whatever and create and express however you are. So that's how that came about.
I love it how full circle it is.
But thank you for asking. That's just who it is. I have some other archetypes too, like the soul huntress is one of she's my major archetype, is the wild heart queen, but then I have some minor ones, that also come to play.
And so as I'm hearing you talk about this, what the story I make up in my head is that as we get to know ourselves deeper, we all have these archetypes.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's part of the guidance that you're offering here, is that these are ways that I have come to know myself.
Yes, that's right.
These are ways that I have come to know the wise parts of me that I can count on when I need them.
That's right. Exactly. And, there's that whole concept of the shadow, that people that do work of psychology, use as an idea or a concept. And the shadow is those parts of us that we reject, or those parts of us that we have a hard time integrating. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the word. And when people think of the shadow, they think of things that are more quote unquote negative or painful or shameful or that kind of thing. But there's also what's called the bright shadow, And the bright shadow is, really that part of us that we have a hard time integrating, which is our power, which is our beauty, which is our wisdom, which is our, the bigness that we are, so the wild heart queen is, that's one of the things that it's like, I am her because I am her. But I also am her as to provide that inspiration for other women, to be able to embrace their fullness, in that way. But there's a big shadow piece for women around that, because like when I do that work with women around identifying the archetypes, and what I do is I put out a different lists of different words, archetypal energies, and then I have people kind of circle, the things on the list that really resonate with them. And then I go for the one that makes them the most uncomfortable. Because that's usually the thing, because it's the one that's uncomfortable is the one that's in shadow. It's like, oh, I can't claim that. That's too much. That's too much. That's too big. That's too intense. I could never live up to that. And it's like, no, you already are that. You just have to own it. So yeah.
I'm struck thinking about a client of mine, a few clients of mine, many clients of mine, who have had a hard time owning certain parts of themselves.
Yes.
Right. And it may be something that is so apparent to me or to their partner, and that they can't witness and see inside of themselves.
Yes, that's right.
And it can even be something like kindness.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't have to be like something like, you're judgmental, and it doesn't have to be something that's hard to take in about oneself, but often even something that others may see like that's a great quality can be really hard for some to take in, because it's not part of the message of how they learned themselves.
That's right. That's part of the, we had talked earlier, about rejection.
Yeah.
And getting rejected from the outside. But then there's this whole inner process of rejection that goes on. And, again, one of the processes that I will take people through is having them make a list of things, that people have said to them that are good things or nice things or things that they can claim about themselves, that they have a hard time claiming about themselves. And it's, it is the shadow, and again, this is the patriarchal bullshit piece of this. There's so much of that, but, the patriarchal mindset is that we are deficient, we are not enough, we are always having to feel, small, and feel like that we're just not enough. And so this work turns that whole thing on its head. And it can be really challenging, like you said, for people to claim, their goodness, their enoughness, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I know for myself, that's been a journey of at least the last decade, if not longer, to reclaim my enoughness.
Yes.
And it is a wild journey, because it takes you down a lot of places that you thought you had long left, or places in which you really have to confront, like, who taught me that? Where did I learn it?
Yes.
And, as one of my colleagues says, and who benefits from me believing that about myself?
Yes, exactly. Right. That's right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, we are those parts of us that are the good parts of us, again, I don't necessarily like that terminology either.
As in good and bad.
Yeah. Because I think all of us, all parts of us are really need to be brought into the fold,
Yeah. Integrated as a wholeness.
Yes. Integrated as a wholeness. Exactly. But there are these parts of us that are, again, like you said, our kindness or our loving nature or our brilliance, our gifts, the gifts that we have to bring to the world. And sometimes those gifts can be, our fierceness, sometimes your gift is your anger, sometimes your gift is, or it could be your wildness. It could be all kinds of things, but yeah, it is that thing. Oh, go ahead. You have something.
Yeah, well, I'm just sitting in like when your gift is your anger, right? And
Yes.
you're so conditioned. Let's just sit with that for a minute, because I think that's probably a place in the year 2020 that a lot of people are kind of trying to figure out.
Yes.
When your gift is your anger and you don't know how to make sense of that, you don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I think that anger is so needed. It's like fuel, it's direction, it's like an arrow. It helps us figure out where we don't have boundaries set, what kind of boundaries maybe we need to set, or what an injustice is that is being done to us or around us that we need to use our voices for. And so anger really can help. It's necessary.
Hugely. It's necessary. It's necessary. Yeah.
And it's, I'm just thinking back to 2016 and the archetype of, the nasty woman.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. Like, right. Yep. Yeah, that's right. It was that same energy. Right. Yeah.
That same energy. And yet being like really that message, like, yeah, you could be that, but if you're that, right, like we'd rather squash you.
Yep. Well, you're going to be rejected, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. For a lot of women, it's dangerous to be angry. Especially if you're in a situation, or you've grown up in a situation, or you're in a current situation, with somebody who is violent, or abusive. And so there's that fear that if you express your anger, that you're going to be met with violence, and that that it is really dangerous, so there's that. And then, there's the whole, this whole other archetype that I'm always working against, which is the good girl, that whole good girl archetype, which is like, you have to be nice, you have to be quiet, you have to be pleasing, you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to upset anybody, and that good girl is generally false. It's a conditioned piece. And so anger is not part of the good girl archetype. There's, anger is, I'm going to say what I think, and I'm going to complain if something is not right. If there's injustice, I'm going to speak up about it. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to say no. And and then, as women, we feel like we're going to be ostracized or rejected. Again, it's something in my circles I work with very consciously.
Yeah.
But, I know in the outer world, people still get shut down around that, around their expression of their anger. And, yeah.
I find it that there's a balancing point in here also. And as we talk about this, that I'm just kind of feeling into, and that's that in our circles where we're doing this healing work, this stuff is so potent, and it is so much a part of just the group consciousness. And as we're having this conversation right now, it's harder to translate.
Yes, it is. It definitely is. Yeah.
Because I know the energy. I know you know the energy. I know we both live inside of that energy a lot. And yet to put it into, it's not something that lives inside of words.
It's so, yes. No, I have spent my entire career, especially, like I said, I have a background as a psychotherapist, and then I started getting involved with the expressive arts and the intuitive painting process, in 94. So that's like 26 years ago or something, and that's when I started my business, Creative Juice Arts, and that whole thing. And I've spent the last 26 years trying to articulate this.
Which you do beautifully in your blogs and your posts and all, and
thank you. Yeah. And I get it, and people will, my students who really get this work, and they're like, oh my God, I'm trying to tell my friends, and all I can say to them is just come and do it. At a certain point, the words help. The words are a way in, but the words cannot even give you, it's not the experience by a long shot.
Right. Yeah. The words tell of the experience. They don't help you to have it.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. And, I have like I said, that's been part of my mission, is to really try to articulate this as best I can.
Yeah.
And I think I do a pretty good job. I mean, I know that.
Agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I can own that. I can own that as one of my gifts. And, I will have people who, they'll just come to my website and they'll read what I have to say, and they'll get in touch with me and they say, okay, I want to sign up for this program and I don't even know why, but something about your words really called something to me, even though I don't really understand exactly what this is, but the words opened a portal, it opened enough of a door that they were willing to step in, to the direct experience.
Yes.
And so it's good from that vantage point, but you're absolutely right. It's not the experience, or nowhere near it.
Yeah. It's because it's so much of a wordless experience. It doesn't live in the, because words, I think, are part of, and I'm no neuroscientist, but words to me feel like they're part of the conscious brain. Like they live up here.
Yes, they live in the head.
And they live in the head. Yes. My listeners can't see me pointing. And the rest of the experience that we have is a full-bodied experience. It's a spiritual experience.
Yes.
And bringing that spirit back into the body.
That's right. That's right.
Is not one that always can live inside of words.
That's right. Exactly. Right. Because, so much of this work that I do, and I know that you do, is about, connecting, helping people to drop down into their embodiment, in their embodied experience of it, and then to open out into the spiritual experience of it. So that both things, and like you said, both of those things are very, they're in the wordless zone, and that's why painting works so beautifully, or, any of the expressive arts. I mean, because like I do, movement and body work with, with people that come to work with me, sound, using sound, I mean, this is something I desperately miss because, of the whole COVID thing, but, being on retreat and bringing musical instruments and having people drum and having people, howl and, really kind of get into their bodies and express, from that wordless place is so powerful. It's just so powerful. And it's, is this Western culture, is so disconnected from the body on that level. And it's so important to reclaim our connection to that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it, to reclaim our connection to that.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with you. I mean, I really appreciate, this opportunity with you today to be able to try to articulate this.
Yeah. I think we're doing a pretty darn good job. Don't get me wrong. And I'm just kind of trying to share with our listeners that this is like the whipped cream on top. This isn't like the whole of it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's, like you were saying, and like I was saying, it's an ongoing, challenge for me, and for you, I mean, you do these podcasts, which is really this, really trying to talk about, these powerful, embodied, spiritual experiences, that cannot be contained with language. But we have to do it. I mean, we have to do it. Yeah.
There's another word that's coming up for me right now we're talking, and it connects back to this predictable miracle and to the wildness and to the unknown and the mystery. And it's magic, right? It's like magic. That space of healing. It's the magic, not necessarily as in like, I'm going to conjure something, but the magic as in reconnecting.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. Well, and it is magic, and people will say that all the time. And it's kind of this thing that, like, as people engage with themselves on this embodied spiritual creative level, and they're painting or they're moving or they're, being in circle and being witnessed, and things start to shift and things start to change. And it feels like magic to people, it's like, oh my God, like, because it's not linear. It's not like, oh, I did this thing and that automatically leads to that thing. It's not, a linear process. It's like you do the work, you keep painting, you keep engaging, you keep allowing, and then all of a sudden you open up into this whole other place and this whole other experience of yourself, and something in you feels open and healed, and you don't even, your brain is like, I have no idea how we got here, you know. And so that's part of the magic of it. Yeah.
And that's it's also just, I want to just kind of point out, it doesn't matter how we get there. What matters is that we've arrived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. Well, it's only, you know, the brain is the only part of us that's like, I have to know the formula. It's like, well, there isn't one. So you're just going to have to let go of that. I'm sorry.
Well, it's part of the journey. Right. And so, as we were starting out today, I was saying back decades ago, I used to lead wilderness expeditions. Yes. And when I did that, we would often start with, this is where we are, and this is where we're aiming to go, so that we can be picked up at the end of our course. Yes. And we'll have some water stashed in these places, but we're not really expecting that we're going to know exactly the journey that we're taking.
Yes.
And, you know, if all goes well, we'll arrive around the time that we plan to, at the place around where we plan to.
Right.
And so for much of this work, the place that we plan to arrive is a more healed, more integrated, more wise place within ourselves.
Yes.
And how we get there is a mix of different parts of that journey. That's the unknown. That's the part that we're opening ourselves to.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Right. Because everybody's journey is different, you know, and that's why you can't, there's no map, you know, and that's one of there's no map. And, you know, one of the things that I work with people is around, you know, trusting their intuition. You know, and what I call the intuition is really, again, it is that wiser part of us that directs us to the next thing, you know, but it only gives us the next thing. It doesn't give us the whole map. It just, and we know we're connected to our intuition because we feel energy, we feel embodied, we feel the intuition is very sure of itself. You know, it knows exactly what needs to happen next. And in the painting process, it's like, yes, I know red needs to go here right now, you know. And the mind might be, oh my God, red is horrible, it's going to mess it up, blah, blah, blah. And the intuition's like, no, I know exactly what needs to happen. But it's a moment to moment experience. Yeah. It's not like the whole thing. And this is where the trust comes in too. I mean, this is another thing that, you know, I'm really working with people. Can you trust in your deeper knowing? Can you trust in your intuitive self and follow that and let it lead you wherever it's going to lead you? And it could look very meandering, or it could look like it's not really going anywhere, or, you know, it can look like a lot of things, but can you continue to trust that? So it's that wilderness thing, you know, again. Yeah. And it's just really, it's so powerful and so potent when you can really begin to paint that way. But then, of course, you know, I always joke around like, this isn't really a painting class. It's really about how do you live, you know, but the painting is just a kind of a sneaky way in.
Well, the painting is a way of experiencing your aliveness and bearing witness to it, right?
Yes. That's right. Yeah. And so that you get a taste for it. And so that you like, oh, I know what this is. I know what this place is. I know what this feels like. Oh, and I have had people say like, oh, I bring this into my life now. It's like, and I'll say, if this situation or problem or whatever's happening in my life right now were a painting, you know,
what would it need right now?
You know? Yeah.
I often think it was the training we did together with Dr. E, where she led us through connecting with our older, wiser 100-year-old self.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was a particular question that we were asked in there to ask our older selves, our wiser selves, like, what would you have me do right now? Kind of question, right?
Yes. Right.
And the first time I did that exercise in that experience, the answer that I got was that I needed to roll down more hills.
Exactly. But it's that kind of thing. Right. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Right.
Until there was a moment like a year ago, where all of a sudden there was a hill in front of me and I just had to roll down it.
Right.
And at the end of that, rolling down that hill, it all made
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
I
Exactly.
understood what that lesson had been. And it took me like a year to integrate it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. Oh, I love that story. That's just such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Because that's what this is. And, you know, that's where the logical, rational, you know, making sense of things mind, you know, is out of its depth when it comes to this kind of thing. Because this is the place of magic. This is the place of mythic, kind of a mythic connection, you know. This is a place of, you know, it's like you're connecting, you know, to that wise healer inside of you, you know, like, and that wise healer is going to ask you to do things on faith, on trust. It's like, okay. And it, again, in the painting process, it's like, okay, well, you've got a beautiful, or in your own mind, a beautiful painting where you're painting all these flowers and it's pinks and pastels. And then the intuition's like, okay, bring in a black lightning, you know, figure in the sky. And you're like, oh my God, that's going to mess up my beautiful painting. And it's like, can you trust that? Can you trust that this is what needs to happen next, even though you don't understand why, you don't like it, you know, it's freaking you out. And so it's that same kind of mysterious, you know, like promptings, you know, from our wise self, like you rolling down the hill. And, you know, and this is what we're being asked to trust.
Yes.
And it's terrifying and exhilarating, you know, all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the exhilaration is, I think, perhaps the biggest thing that I got from rolling down that hill.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Well, what did you get? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I got something that was so incredibly topsy-turvy.
Yes.
And simultaneously, like as jumbled as it made me feel, it also reconnected me to a part of me that has always known that these hills are here for playing.
Yeah.
You know, like that
Yes.
there is so much more of that here in this world for me to taste and to live inside of. And why the heck am I not rolling down more hills?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, you know, one of the, you know, archetypes that exists in a lot of different cultures is the trickster archetype, you know, and that's kind of what that made me think of. You know, the trickster was saying to you, okay, do this wacky thing that makes no sense to, I mean, it would make sense to your 4-year-old self.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even to my 12 and 10-year-old daughters, it made sense, you know, but to me, no. Right.
Right. And so it's like all of those ways of being in the world that are, you know, we get smaller and smaller, you know, it's like, okay, we fit in, we follow the track, we follow the rules. And then, you know, we wonder why our lives are not rich and, you know, engaging and interesting and fulfilling. You know, we're just not rolling down enough hills.
Right. Yeah, totally. And that's the thing. Like I couldn't hold back the laughter once I started rolling.
Great. So the joy really came through. Oh my gosh.
It was just, you know, like unlocked it.
Yes.
So, there's medicine in that.
Total medicine. It's that's such a great word. It's like total medicine.
Yeah.
And that's really when you're engaging with the intuition, when you're engaging with the creative process, when you're engaging with the mystery, when you're engaging with, you know, the spiritual energy, it's not going to, you know, it's going to call you outside of those conditioned walls.
Yeah.
Because again, we're in these little cages, you know. What does it mean to be an adult? What does it mean to fit in? What does it mean to be successful? I mean, all these things.
We're living inside of judgment, and it's making us shrink. It's making us smaller.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Right. Judgment and expectation and, you know, the rules, you know, and who we are supposed to be, who we're, you know, how we get approval, how we get accepted, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, and so, you know, this work that I'm doing and that you're doing is really helping people to break free of that, I mean, because the other thing too is that, part of being this culture is like, we're really trained to behave, because that's,
Imagine if we all just went around rolling down hills.
Right. Exactly. But it's that whole thing about, what's the word that I'm thinking of? It's not, it's tamed and untamed, but there's, anyway, something along
I'm
those
coming up
lines.
with contained, uncontained.
Contained and uncontained. That's a good one too. Yeah, exactly. But domesticated. That's the word I was looking for. That's the word I was looking for. So we've been domesticated, and domesticated beings are more controllable, by the culture at large. And so
they know the rules.
They know the rules and they follow the rules and they don't rock the boat. And so this is where the whole, like, we need to shake the world up. The world is getting shaken up, in this huge way. And we need to be able to really go along with that and just let things be shaken up, and to allow ourselves to, break the rules and to break out of those cultural expectations about who we're supposed to be, because all of that stuff is what's killing us, all of those places. So this is an exciting time from that vantage point, I think.
See, now that's an interesting way to see it.
Yeah. Well, it is. Right. Exactly. Right. Well, because it's that thing, like, the change is happening. The earthquake is happening and it's breaking everything up. And so, I think a lot of people that are suffering around this, I mean, and I know there's suffering that happens on a lot of levels, and I don't want to minimize that at all. But there's some parts of it is when people are trying to hold on to what was, and won't allow the change to happen into what can become. And there's so much potential and possibility here for all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really aware within my community of, in terms of holding on to what was, how hard the adjustment in these COVID pandemic times has been for a lot of families with kids not being in school.
Yes.
In terms of holding on to what was. And it's interesting too, because what I think is really coming forth in this time is we're seeing inequities on so many different levels.
Yes, absolutely. That's
and right. So there's like a exposing of what has always been that hasn't been working.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Right. Exactly and right. So here's an opportunity, not just to shake things up, but to really maybe start to figure out what it means to get it right.
Exactly.
If there even is a right. But what would it take for us to do this in a way that's more equitable across the country?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Exactly. Well, right. Exactly. Because a lot of what's being shaken up are the systems of injustice, that we have been all privy to, we've all been complicit with. That's the word that I'm looking for. We've all been complicit in, those systems of injustice.
And we've been built around them. We've been educated by them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's what the air we breathe, it's the water we drink. So having that all shaken up, and brought to the surface. And this is that whole shadow piece too, it's like really looking at things that are really hard to look at and really painful to look at. And there's a lot of shame, that comes up for people around looking at these dynamics, these systems, the ways, I know for myself, my own personal journey around this is like really looking at the ways that I have participated and totally unconsciously, totally from my own conditioning, but now I'm waking up. Yeah. And so there's an opportunity. It's like, oh, wow, this isn't what I want. I don't want the world to be this way. So I want to participate in the shakeup, and, I want more justice in the world, as well as all the other things we talked about, love and acceptance and compassion and, all of that. So,
right. And I think that, if we're really focusing on seeing everyone and being gentle and holding compassion and loving others and collaborating, that we're leaning towards a more just culture.
Absolutely. That's right.
that is what we're leaning to create.
That's right.
And it comes from this, really from this deep place of, this is what we humans need, and not just humans, like we can look back on attachment studies and see that this is what monkeys need. And this is what, right. Like it's a primate kind of experience, and maybe not even just primates, but it's very much an experience of being alive.
Yeah. Well, and it's also that thing, when you talked about the animal thing, and it's, it's how we need to be with each other as humans, but it's also the relationships that we have with the world and the land and the other beings and the other creatures, with the trees and with the animals and with the rocks and with the, the rivers as living beings. That's a whole other conversation, but, really
and an
opening to that. It's hugely important, because again, that's one of the things in this culture that we have been totally trained out of, trained out of being in relationship to the world as alive as it is.
Yeah. What strikes me, and maybe this is a good place to kind of begin the process of wrapping up this conversation, but what strikes me is, we've been talking about patriarchy and the overculture and the ways in which we've been taught that we're deficient.
Yes.
And so much of this has this feeling of the ones in power trying to stay in power.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
That's right.
And so if we really allow for our full expression of who we are,
yes.
Right? Whether we're talking in a smaller unit, like a family unit, or we're talking in a larger global unit.
Yes.
If we really are fully accepting of who we are and of an end of each other, then what does that mean for this world? It really does shake up the balance.
It shakes up the balance. And I mean, that's part of the, what was the word that you just used? That's part of the the patriarchal conditioning, the not enoughness, not enoughness piece of it, and part of the not enoughness is that we don't have power. We're not allowed to be powerful, or that we feel like we're powerless, and that we can't impact, the situations that we're in. And if we believe that, then we're going to act in that way. But if we're really connected and we're really supported in being connected to our true gifts and our true power, including our rage and our ability to set boundaries and to say what we want and to say no, and to, paint those big penis paintings if we need to, it does shake up the culture at large, because then we are moving into these positions where we can say, no, I do not want that. And I'm going to fight, to change that, that imbalance. And that's the potential I think that we have right now.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. This has been, I think this has really been a magical conversation, and I thank you for joining me in it. Oh,
thank you, Rebecca. This has just been so beautiful, the way that we have come together and woven, this beautiful expression together today. I'm so pleased and touched and very grateful, just very grateful.
As am I. Will you please let our listeners know one more time where they can find you?
Yes. So I have a website. My website is Creative Juices Arts, so creativejuicesarts.com. And if you go there, you can find, I have all kind of blog posts and, different offerings. There's a newsletter that you can sign up for. I send out on a semi-regular basis where, my musings about creativity and life and, love and all that kind of stuff. And I'd love to have you as part of my community. So
thank you. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to taking one of your classes in the near future. I hope that other folks will take a look at what your offerings are and partake as well. Thank you again for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Rebecca. This was really magical.
Yes,
I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll check out my upcoming offerings for 2021 at connectfulness.com/offerings. And before you go, I have one more special announcement. My colleagues, Jules Shore and Victoria Issa, and I we are starting a new podcast. It's called Why Does My Partner or Why Doesn't My Partner? And in order for us to do this really well, we need your help in the form of questions. And so if you go over to the whydoesmypartner.com website, you can send us an audio recording of your questions right there, or you can write one in. We would love for your input. So hop on over to whydoesmypartner.com. And if you want to support the ongoing production of this podcast, the best way that you can do that is to simply subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast platform, and then share it with folks. Let them know what you liked and why you liked it. I would greatly appreciate that. I want to express my deep gratitude for Sarah and Chris Farris, the musicians behind the beautiful soundtrack for the Connectfulness Practice podcast. They recorded and mixed the soundtrack at Kidney Stone Studio. This podcast is produced by me, Rebecca Wong, and copyrighted by Connectfulness Counseling. Until our next episode, take care, stay healthy, be well.